They say the quietest parts of a house hold the most secrets. For 20 years I was the quietest part of many houses in London. I learned the rhythm of a home by the sounds it made when no one was listening. The sigh of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the whisper of the wind against the windowpanes. I was a ghost in the machine of other people's lives, a cleaner, a polisher, a silent witness. But in my daughter's house I was supposed to be more. I was supposed to be the foundation. Now she wants me to use the back door so her new friends don't have to hear my Trinidadian accent. She thinks my voice is the ghost to be exorcised from her perfect life. She has no idea I am about to become the one thing she can't clean away. Before I begin, thank you for being here. For being part of this community. If you believe in the power of a woman finding her voice and reclaiming her dignity, you are in the right place. Please, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It means the world to me. Now let me tell you what they did to me. My name is Ruby Brown, and for the better part of my 70 years, my hands have been my trade. They are not beautiful hands. The knuckles are swollen from years of wringing out wet rags. The skin is dry and crisscrossed with a map of fine lines from bleach and polish. The nails are kept short and practical. But these hands are honest. They have scrubbed the floors of strangers, polished the silver of people who would not meet my eye, and most importantly they built a dream. Not my dream but my daughter's. My story in London began like so many others of my generation, with a cold wind and a suitcase full of hope. I came from Trinidad in the 70s, a young woman with a strong back and a belief that hard work was a prayer that would one day be answered. I found my footing in the endless, sprawling city, cleaning the grand houses of Kensington and Chelsea, my life measured in the shifts I could pick up, the overtime I could manage. My own dreams were small and practical. A neat, clean flat of my own, a community at my church in Kilburn, the respect of those I worked for. The grand dream, the one that consumed my life, belonged to my only child, Evelyn. She was my miracle, born late in my life, a bright, shining star in my quiet world. Her father, a good man, passed when she was just a girl, leaving me with the single, burning purpose of seeing her become everything he and I could not. She was brilliant, her mind as sharp as a tack, her ambition a fire that I was determined to keep stoked. When she set her sights on becoming a doctor, a goal so lofty it seemed to belong to another universe, I made it my own. I saw it as my sacred duty. For the next 20 years, my life was a testament to that single mission. I didn't just work one cleaning job, I worked 3. I took the early morning shifts in the city offices before the bankers arrived, the daytime shifts in the private homes of Holland Park, and the weekend shifts cleaning pubs after they closed. Every pound I earned, beyond what was needed for our small flat and simple food, was poured into Evelyn. It paid for the tutors who got her through her A-levels, the fees for the top private school that would give her a chance, the rent on her student flat, the impossibly expensive medical textbooks. I would go to the university bookshop myself, a list clutched in my hand, and pay in cash, feeling the weight of the books that were my daughter's future. I ate rice and peas so she could eat in the student canteen. I wore my coat indoors to save on the heating bill so she would never be cold in her dormitory. This was not a burden. In my mind, it was an investment in a beautiful future. It was a mother's love, made manifest in bleach and polish and aching bones. And the investment paid off. Dr. Evelyn Reed. My daughter. A successful dermatologist with a private clinic on Harley Street, a handsome husband named Marcus who worked in finance, and a pristine white stuccoed townhouse in Holland Park. She had achieved the dream. She had ascended to a world I only ever saw from the service entrance. After she married Marcus, I tried to step back to finally rest. But Evelyn insisted I keep cleaning for her just once a week. "Mummy, no one does it like you," she'd say, her voice full of that casual affection that was both a comfort and a command. "It just helps me out so much." And so I continued, the cleaner in my own daughter's home. I told myself it was just helping out, a way to stay close, to feel useful. I ignored the fact that she paid me a token amount, a sum that was an insult compared to what her neighbors paid their cleaners, an amount that neatly framed our relationship as employer and employee, not mother and child. The first crack in my carefully constructed reality appeared on a Tuesday afternoon. Evelyn was hosting her book club, a group of sleek, sharp-featured women with expensive handbags and voices that dripped with casual condescension. As I arrived, my cleaning caddy in hand, Evelyn met me in the hallway, her face a mask of polite anxiety. "Mummy," she whispered, glancing nervously towards the living room where her friends were gathered. Do you mind using the back service door from now on? Just on Tuesdays. It's easier than trying to explain. The words hung in the air between us. The back door. In my own daughter's house. I felt a cold, sharp sting, a physical sensation of shame. But my mind, conditioned by 2 decades of sacrifice, immediately rushed to her defense. She's just stressed, I told myself. These women are intimidating. He's trying to fit in. She doesn't mean to hurt me. Of course, darling, I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the sudden tremor in my heart. No problem at all. A few weeks later, the request was refined. Mummy, she said, again with that gentle, apologetic tone that was more cutting than any anger. A few of the girls were saying, they said your accent is a bit strong. It's lovely, of course, but it can be a bit jarring when they're trying to discuss the book. Do you mind just not talking if you happen to be in the room? My accent, the sound of my home, the rhythm of Trinidad, the music of my people was now jarring. I felt the blood drain from my face. But again the excuses flooded in. She's just repeating what her foolish friends said. She's embarrassed to admit it. She doesn't know how to navigate this new world. I nodded, unable to speak, and retreated to the kitchen. I swallowed the pain, choked it down with a glass of water, and told myself with the fierce, desperate love of a mother, that this was a phase. That the daughter I had raised, the girl who had clung to me and called me her savior, was still in there somewhere, buried beneath the expensive clothes and the fear of not belonging. I chose to believe in the good heart I had spent my life nurturing. It was a choice I would come to regret with every fiber of my being. The charity gala was to be Evelyn and Marcus's coronation. It was their official ascension into the rarefied air of London's new elite. Marcus's firm was the primary sponsor, and their Holland Park townhouse was to be the venue. For weeks, the house was a whirlwind of activity. Caterers, florists, and party planners moved through the rooms with an air of brisk importance, their clipboards and headsets symbols of a world I did not belong to. My role in all of this was to be the pre-cleaner, the one who made the house immaculate before the professionals arrived to make it beautiful. I scrubbed floors on my hands and knees, polished the endless panes of glass in the conservatory, and made sure every surface gleamed, a silent, invisible stagehand for my daughter's grand performance. I held on to a small, secret hope. I imagined that on the night of the gala my role would change. That for once I would be a guest. I had a dress laid out in my mind, a simple, elegant navy blue lace frock I had seen in a shop window, the kind of dress a mother would wear. I pictured myself standing quietly in a corner, my heart swelling with pride as I watched my daughter, the brilliant doctor, the gracious hostess, move through the glittering crowd. It was a foolish dream. A fantasy born of a love that refused to see the truth. The truth arrived a week before the event. Evelyn sat me down in the kitchen, the one room where we still occasionally spoke as mother and daughter. She had a cup of tea for me, a gesture of kindness that I now understood was a prelude to a blow. She looked at me with an expression of practiced, gentle cruelty, her face a perfect portrait of sorrowful necessity. "Mummy," she began, her voice soft and low. "We need to talk about the gala." I felt a familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach, but I smiled, determined to be positive. "Yes, darling. It's all so exciting. The house will look beautiful." "It will," she agreed, not meeting my eyes. She stirred her own tea, her silver spoon clinking softly against the fine bone china. "And that's why we need everything to be absolutely perfect. Marcus has clients coming from all over the world. This is a very important night for his career, for our future." "I understand," I said. "I'll make sure the house is spotless before I leave on Friday." She finally looked at me, her gaze direct and unblinking. "That's the thing, Mummy. On the day of the gala, it would be best if you weren't here at all." The words didn't register at first. They were just sounds disconnected from meaning. "Not here," I repeated, my voice a faint echo of hers. "But where would I go?" "I don't know," she said with a small, helpless shrug that was entirely disingenuous. "Go to the cinema. Visit Winston. It doesn't matter. It's just, for this one night it would be less complicated." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper, as if she were letting me in on a painful secret. "You know how people talk. They ask questions. Who is that lovely woman? And then I have to explain, you know, that you're my mother but you're also my cleaner. It's awkward, It's confusing for them. Confusing. My existence was confusing. She wasn't finished. The final killing blow was yet to come. Your presence, she said, the words chosen with surgical precision, it just brings up a past we've all moved on from. A past of struggle. We want to present an image of success, of having arrived. Do you understand? I understood perfectly. The past she had moved on from was the very past that had paid for her present. The struggle she was so keen to erase was my struggle. My sacrifice. My entire life's work. I was the living, breathing evidence of a history she was desperate to bury, and she was handing me the shovel. I sat there, frozen, the teacup trembling in my hand. All of my excuses, all of my carefully constructed rationalizations, crumbled into dust. This wasn't about her being stressed. This wasn't about her being tired. This was a calculated, strategic decision to erase me from the narrative of her life because I was no longer aesthetically acceptable. I was a stain on her perfect white canvas. As if sensing my devastation, she reached into her purse and pulled out a plain white envelope. Here, she said, pushing it across the table. This is for this month. And I've put a little extra in for the inconvenience. For being so understanding. I looked at the envelope. It felt heavy, not with money but with the weight of the final, unforgivable insult. She was paying me to disappear. She was buying my silence in my absence. I didn't take the envelope. I couldn't bring myself to touch it. I stood up on legs that felt like they belonged to a stranger, my body numb, my heart a cold, dead stone in my chest. I walked out of the kitchen, out of the house, using the front door for a change, and I didn't look back. The shattering was complete. The loving mother, the one who made excuses and swallowed her pain, died in that kitchen. And in her place, something else, something cold and hard and clear, began to form. The dream she had built for her daughter had become her prison. And she was finally ready to break free. The journey home to my small flat in Kilburn was a blur. I sat on the top deck of the number 18 bus, staring out at the familiar London streets without seeing them. The city, which had been the backdrop of my life for over 40 years, felt alien and hostile. Every smiling face, every advertisement for a happy family, felt like a personal mockery. The pain in my chest was no longer a dull ache. It was a sharp, physical agony, the pain of a wound that has been torn open. When I finally reached my flat, my sanctuary, it offered no comfort. The silence that usually felt peaceful now felt like an accusation. I wasn't just sad. I was in a state of profound cognitive dissonance, my mind struggling to reconcile two opposing realities. There was the Evelyn I had raised, the bright, loving girl who would write me long letters from university, who would cry on the phone when she was homesick, who would hug me tightly and call me her savior. And then there was Dr. Evelyn Reed, the cold, calculating stranger who had looked at me with pity and dismissed my entire life sacrifice as an inconvenience, a past we've all moved on from. How could both women be the same person? The question echoed in the silent rooms of my flat, a torturous, unanswerable riddle. This turmoil, this desperate need to find the girl I had lost within the woman who had betrayed me, led me to the top of my wardrobe. There, tucked away behind a stack of old blankets, was a worn cardboard shoebox. It was a simple, unassuming thing, but it was my most precious possession. It was my archive, my history, my proof. With trembling hands, I lifted it down and set it on my bed. The lid was soft with age. I hadn't opened it in years. I hadn't needed to. The memories were enough. But now I needed more than memories. I needed evidence. I needed to know if the love I remembered was real or just a figment of my own hopeful imagination. I opened the box. The smell of old paper and fading ink rose up to meet me. Inside, nestled together, was the tangible proof of my 20-year sacrifice. On top was a stack of old bank statements, the paper thin and yellowed. I traced my finger over the highlighted lines, huge withdrawals, sums that represented months of my back-breaking work, all transferred to an account for Evelyn Reed university fees. There were receipts, dozens of them, from university bookshops for textbooks on anatomy and pharmacology, each one costing more than my weekly food budget. There was the receipt for the deposit on her first student flat, the one with the leaky tap that I had come and fixed myself. There was even the receipt for the expensive dark blue suit I had bought her for her medical school interviews, because she had cried that she had nothing to wear that would make her look like a future doctor. But beneath the financial records lay the heart of the matter. The letters. Dozens of them tied together with a faded red ribbon. They were written on thin airmail paper in Evelyn's youthful looping handwriting. I untied the ribbon and began to read. The early letters were full of homesickness and desperation. "Mummy, I don't think I can do this. The other girls all have so much money. Their parents send them hampers from Harrods. I feel so out of place." And my heart ached with the memory of sending her a parcel with her favorite Trinidadian sweets and a new scarf I had knitted myself. Then came the letters filled with pleas for money, always couched in the language of love and gratitude. "Mummy, my rent is due and my student loan hasn't come through. I am so sorry to ask, but could you possibly help? I promise I will pay it all back, every single penny, as soon as I qualify." And then the promises. They were woven through nearly every letter, a constant refrain of future repayment. "You are my savior, Mummy. I could not do this without you. I swear when I'm a doctor you'll never have to clean another house again. I'll buy you a beautiful flat with a garden, and you can finally rest." In another letter, after she had passed a particularly difficult set of exams, she had written, "I owe all of this to you. One day I will buy you a little cottage by the sea somewhere warm and you can sit in the sun all day. I promise, Mummy. I promise." I read the letters for hours, the tears streaming down my face. But these were not just tears of sorrow. They were tears of validation. The love had been real. The gratitude had been real. The promises had been real. The girl who wrote these letters existed. This wasn't a delusion. This was a contract. An unwritten, unspoken contract of the heart, yes, but a contract nonetheless. And she had breached it in the most brutal way imaginable. The loving words in the letters, contrasted with the cold, cutting cruelty of the gala banishment, did not confuse me anymore. They clarified everything. The girl I had raised had made a promise. The woman she had become had broken it. The shoebox was no longer just a collection of memories. It was a dossier. It was evidence. And as I carefully placed the last letter back in the box and tied the red ribbon, the heartbroken mother in me finally gave way to the creditor. The debt was not just emotional. It was real. And it was time to collect. The next day I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The grief was still there, a heavy stone in my gut, but it was now surrounded by a new hard shell of purpose. I knew I couldn't fight this battle alone. My first and only thought was of Winston. Winston was a retired bus driver, a proud Jamaican man I had known for 30 years through our church. He was a man of immense dignity and principle, with a booming laugh and eyes that saw everything. He had been a silent witness to my long struggle, often shaking his head as I rushed off to a third cleaning job on a Saturday night. "Ruby, my dear," he would say, "that girl of yours better appreciate the woman you are." I called him and asked if I could come over. My voice was steady, but he heard the tremor beneath it. "Come now," he said simply. I walked to his small, neat flat, the shoebox held tightly in my arms like a precious, fragile thing. I sat at his kitchen table and over a cup of strong, sweet tea I told him everything. I told him about the back door, the comments about my accent, and the final, brutal banishment from the gala. I spoke without tears, my voice flat and even, laying out the facts as if I were a witness at an inquest. Winston listened in silence, his large hands wrapped around his mug, his expression growing darker with every word. When I finished, he didn't offer empty platitudes or comforting words. He slammed his hand down on the table, making the teacups jump. "No," he boomed, his voice a righteous thunder that seemed to shake the small room. "No. This is not just disrespect, Ruby. This is wickedness. This is theft. She stole your life, your years, your money. And she thinks she can just throw you away? Not on my watch." His anger was a balm to my soul. It was the validation I so desperately needed. He saw the injustice not as a sad family drama, but as a profound moral crime. "What's in the box?" he asked, his eyes fixed on it. I opened it and showed him the contents, the bank slips, the receipts, and finally the letters. He put on his reading glasses and read several of them, his lips moving silently. He read the promises Evelyn had made, his expression hardening into a mask of cold fury. "This," he said, tapping a finger on one of the letters, "this is not just a daughter's promise. This is a debt of honor. And she has no honor." He stood up, pacing the small kitchen. "You cannot let this go. Not just for you. For all of us. For every mother who scrubs floors so her child can fly. For every parent whose sacrifice is forgotten. You must fight. But how, Winston? I asked, the fight seeming like an impossible mountain to climb. She is a doctor. Her husband is a lawyer. I am a cleaner. And you are a creditor, he said, his voice firm. And you have proof. He stopped pacing and looked at me. I know a woman. A solicitor. Miss Fatima Khan. Her parents were Pakistani immigrants, ran a corner shop in Southall. She worked her way up, went to a... She's sharp as a razor and she does not like bullies. He helps people from our community. People the big fancy firms won't touch. You will go and see her. He wrote down the name and number on a piece of paper and pressed it into my hand. The idea of seeing a lawyer was terrifying. It was a world I knew nothing about. But Winston's belief in me, his righteous anger on my behalf, gave me a strength I didn't know I possessed. A week later, I was sitting in the small but professional office of Ms. Fatima Khan. She was everything Winston had said, sharp, intelligent, with eyes that seemed to assess every word I said for its truth and its legal weight. I told her my story just as I had told Winston. She listened patiently, her expression unreadable. I could see the professional skepticism in her eyes. It was, on the surface, a case of family drama, a he said she said with little legal standing. Then I opened the shoebox. I laid the contents out on her desk. The bank slips. The receipts. The letters. I watched as she began to read. I saw the subtle shift in her posture, the way her eyes narrowed in concentration. She read Evelyn's promises, her pleas for money, her declarations of eternal gratitude. She picked up the bank statements and a calculator, doing some quick sums. The professional skepticism on her face was slowly replaced by a look of focused, intense interest. She finished and looked up at me. Mrs. Brown, she said, her voice now devoid of any doubt. This is not just a moral grievance. What your friend Winston called a debt of honor, the British legal system has a name for. It's called promissory estoppel. It means that a promise is legally enforceable, even without a formal contract, if one party acted upon that promise to their detriment. You acted. You spent 20 years of your life and your life savings based on her repeated written promises of future care and repayment. She induced your sacrifice. This, she said, tapping the stack of letters, is not just a daughter's note. This is the foundation of a very strong legal case. For the first time in weeks, a flicker of hope, fierce and bright, ignited within me. I was not just a heartbroken mother. I was a client. And I had just found my champion. The weeks that followed were a revelation. Under the expert guidance of Ms. Fatima Khan, my pain was transformed into a plan, my grief into a strategy. Her small office became my sanctuary and my war room. For the first time in my life, I felt like my story was being heard not with pity but with purpose. Ms. Khan helped me weaponize my pain and proof, not with the messy, unpredictable force of emotional rage, but with the cold, irrefutable precision of the law. Our primary weapon was the letter. It was not a simple bill but a comprehensive legal demand, a document so thoroughly researched and powerfully worded that it was designed to cause a crisis the moment it was opened. Ms. Khan explained that we would not be suing for emotional distress. That was too subjective, too easy to dismiss. We would be suing for concrete, quantifiable damages. The first part of the letter was the financial statement. This was my task. With Ms. Khan's guidance, I spent days at the local library, poring over old newspapers and online archives, researching the cost of living and education in London over the past 2 decades. I created a spreadsheet. It was a meticulous, heartbreaking accounting of my sacrifice. I listed every tuition payment I had made, documented by the bank slips. I listed every textbook, every accommodation deposit, every train ticket home for the holidays. Then, at Ms. Khan's insistence, we adjusted every single figure for 20 years of inflation. A £5,000 tuition fee from 20 years ago was now worth nearly double. The numbers on the spreadsheet grew, each one a testament to a meal I had skipped, a new coat I had foregone, a moment of rest I had denied myself. The final sum of my direct financial investment was shocking, a figure that would be a significant blow to even a wealthy household. The second part of the letter was Ms. Khan's masterstroke. It was a section titled, Claim for Deferred Compensation and Breach of Promise. This is where the letters from the shoebox became our sharpest sword. The section began by quoting Evelyn's own words back to her. "Mummy, I swear when I'm a doctor, you'll never have to clean another house again. And I'll buy you a beautiful flat with a garden and you can finally rest." Ms. Khan argued in cold, clear legal prose that these were not idle, youthful promises. They were a repeated, consistent offer of future compensation in lieu of present payment. They constituted a verbal and written agreement for future care and repayment, an agreement that had induced me, Ruby Brown, to provide 2 decades of financial support and domestic labor. She argued that since Dr. Evelyn Reed had now breached this promise in the most fundamental way, the value of that promised compensation was now due. We researched the cost of a modest 1-bedroom flat with a garden in a quiet, safe London suburb. We calculated the cost of a 20-year private pension that would allow a woman of my age to live in dignity without working. We added these figures to the total. The final demand was a life-altering sum, a number so large it would not just inconvenience my daughter. It would threaten the very foundation of the effortless, luxurious life she had built on top of my invisible one. The final step was deciding on the delivery. Miss Khan was adamant. "We do not send this to her home," she said, her eyes glinting. "We do not allow her husband, the lawyer, to intercept it and control the narrative. We strike at the heart of her identity, the thing she values more than anything, including you, her professional reputation." The letter, enclosed in a heavy cream envelope marked, "Strictly private and confidential, be opened by addressee only," was sent via bonded courier not to the Holland Park townhouse, but to Dr. Evelyn Reed's prestigious private clinic on Harley Street. It would arrive during her business hours, delivered by a uniformed courier into the hands of her receptionist, in front of her colleagues and her wealthy patients. It was a declaration of war delivered to the very seat of her power. That same afternoon, after receiving confirmation that the letter had been delivered, I took out my old, simple mobile phone. My hands were perfectly steady. I scrolled to Evelyn's name. For a moment, I saw the face of the little girl I had raised and a pang of sorrow shot through me. But then I saw the cool, dismissive look in her eyes in the kitchen, and my resolve hardened. I typed out a simple 1-line text message. It was the coldest, most liberating sentence I had ever written. "I will no longer be able to clean for you. This is my final notice." I pressed send. The message was delivered. The bridge was burned. The battle had begun. The silence that followed the delivery of the letter was the calm before a hurricane. For 3 days I heard nothing. I imagined the scene at the Harley Street clinic. The discreet arrival of the courier, the crisp envelope handed to Evelyn between patients, the dawning horror on her face as she read the meticulously calculated bill for her own life. I pictured the panicked phone call to her husband, Marcus, the frantic search for a lawyer who could make this all go away. They had cast the first stone by casting me out, but they had clearly never imagined I would have the strength to build a fortress from the rubble. The hurricane broke on a Saturday morning. My phone rang and the screen flashed with Evelyn's name. I let it ring 4 times. A small act of reclaiming the power she had always held over me. When I finally answered, the voice on the other end was a torrent of rage and disbelief. "What is this?" she screamed, dispensing with any greeting. "What in God's name is this letter? Are you trying to ruin me?" I held the phone slightly away from my ear, my heart beating a steady, calm rhythm. "Hello, Evelyn," I said, my voice even. "I assume you have received the correspondence from my solicitor." "Your solicitor?" she shrieked. "You have a solicitor? You are a cleaner. You can't sue me. I am your daughter. You made it very clear last week that our relationship was no longer one of mother and daughter," I replied, my voice as cool and clear as a pane of glass I had polished 1,000 times. "You defined it as a business arrangement when you handed me my wages and banned me from your home. I am simply settling my final account. This is blackmail. Marcus says this is blackmail," she yelled, her voice cracking with a hysteria that gave me no satisfaction, only a profound sense of pity for the person she had become. "My solicitor, Ms. Khan, calls it a claim for unjust enrichment and promissory estoppel," I said, savoring the legal terms that were now my shield and my sword. "She is very much looking forward to discussing it in a public court. I imagine the newspapers would find the story of a Harley Street doctor and her cleaner mother quite compelling, don't you?" There was a choked, strangled sound on the other end of the line. I had aimed my arrow at the heart of her greatest vulnerability, her public image. The call ended abruptly. The next communication was not from Evelyn, but from a slick, expensive law firm representing her and Marcus. The tone was no longer hysterical. It was cold and threatening, but the message was clear. They wanted to negotiate. The climax of my 20-year story did not take place in a dramatic courtroom. It happened in the quiet, sterile boardroom of Ms. Fatima Khan's office. It was a scene I will never forget. I sat on one side of the long, polished table with Ms. Khan beside me. On the other side sat Evelyn and Marcus, flanked by two stone-faced lawyers in bespoke suits. Evelyn would not look at me. She stared at a point on the wall just over my head, her face pale and tight with fury and humiliation. Miss Khan was magnificent. She laid out our case with calm, irrefutable logic. She presented the bank statements. She presented the receipts. And then she took out the letters. She had made photocopies for everyone at the table. She slid one across to Evelyn. "Dr. Reed," Miss Khan said, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Is this your handwriting?" She pointed to the line. "Mummy, I swear when I'm a doctor, you'll never have to clean another house again." Evelyn stared at her own youthful, looping script as if it were a snake. She could not deny it. It was her word, her promise, her bond. The room was silent. In that moment her entire defense crumbled. Her lawyers began to whisper furiously to her and Marcus. The fight was over. All that was left was to negotiate the terms of surrender. I walked out of that office with a settlement agreement for a life-altering sum of money. It was not just compensation. It was a reckoning. It was the price of my life's work, my dignity, my erased history, all quantified and returned to me. I did not buy a cottage by the sea. My life was in London, in my community. But I bought my small flat in Kilburn, the one I had been renting for 30 years. Owning it, truly owning it, felt like the deepest luxury. The rest of the money, the majority of it, I used to create something new. With the help of Ms. Khan and my dear friend Winston, I established the Brown Grant. It is a scholarship foundation, a registered charity, dedicated to helping young Caribbean students in London pursue higher education, with a special focus on those entering the medical field. Our first recipient is a brilliant young woman from Jamaica who wants to be a surgeon. I see her sometimes for tea. She is full of fire and gratitude. She tells me about her studies, her dreams, her struggles. I look at her and I see the daughter I thought I had raised. I no longer speak to Evelyn. The financial settlement was the final word in our story. I sometimes see her picture in society magazines, smiling her perfect, polished smile. There is no anger left in me, only a quiet, profound sadness for the woman she chose to become. My story ends not with a grand victory but with a quiet peace. I sit in the front room of my own flat, a flat that is truly mine, and I read the letters of thanks from the students my grant supports. My hands, the hands that scrubbed and polished and toiled in the shadows of other people's lives, are now the hands that sign the checks that build new dreams. I have reclaimed my dignity, not by forcing my daughter to love me, but by taking the sacrifice she discarded and turning it into a legacy. A legacy of gratitude, of opportunity, of ensuring that other mothers' hard work will not be erased but celebrated. And that, I have learned, is a peace that no amount of money can buy.